Have you ever heard the story of the Chinese farmer? No? Well, it goes like this. Long ago, in ancient China, there was a humble farmer who lived a simple life at his homestead. One day, his one and only horse got loose and ran away. When the news of what had happened spread throughout the village, all the neighbors came around to his house and said, "We're so sorry you lost your one and only horse. You must feel awful. It's too bad." And the farmer simply shrugged his shoulders and said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned and brought with it 7 more healthy horses. As the dust settled from the horses' heavy galloping, the farmer could see that his neighbors were running along a few hundred yards behind, eager to share their congratulations. When they finally arrived at his house, they said, "Your horse came back and brought with it 7 more healthy horses? You must feel overjoyed. Isn't it wonderful?" And the farmer just yawned and said, "Maybe." The next day, the farmer's son was attempting to tame one of the wild horses. He managed to mount it and successfully rode it for several minutes. He was fully convinced that the horse was broken in. But as the farmer's son was returning to the stables, the horse suddenly bucked him off, breaking his leg. The news quickly spread from door to door all throughout the village, and all the neighbors came around to his house with distressed looks on their faces and said, "Your son broke his leg trying to tame one of the wild horses. You must feel terrible. It's too bad." And the farmer just looked off at the setting sun and said, "Maybe." The next day, the conscription officers from the imperial city arrived looking for recruits for the army. They recruited almost all of the neighbors' sons. When they finally came knocking at the farmer's door, they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. As the officers left with their new recruits, all the neighbors came around to his house and said, "They took my son. They took mine too. But your son was spared because he broke his leg. You must feel so blessed. Isn't it wonderful?" And the farmer simply said, "Maybe." Now, what could the farmer possibly have meant by his nonchalant remarks? Did he not recognize the significance of what was happening in his life? Was this farmer a complete fool, or a sage hidden in plain sight? Now, let us entertain for a moment the idea that this farmer, in fact, had some wisdom to share with the villagers. The farmer made the keen observation that life doesn't come to us with a package insert, explaining all of the core principles that we must adhere to, and the various things that we should deem as good or bad. His responses neither contested nor supported their conclusions. He left the door open to their interpretations, which in and of itself subtly pointed to a very simple truth: that life has no inherent meaning, and that we decide, if we so choose, what our own personal meaning of life can be. Ultimately, meaning is optional. It is not a necessity for the functions of life, as we can see so clearly in nature. The leaves sprout forth from little sleeping buds, and then grow into lush and vibrant hues of green, then metamorphose into burning red, golden yellow, and amber orange, before finally withering into brown and falling to the earth to decompose, all without the need for our interpretations. Seeing the world as inherently neutral provides ample breathing room for us to observe the happenings of life, and then from that place of observation decide how we would like to relate to it. Now, with that being said, were the farmer's neighbors wrong in their interpretation of the situation? Not at all. They were simply choosing their meaning to imprint upon the experience. However, they most likely didn't realize that it was exactly that, choice. You see, for much of humanity, this vital ability to choose our own meaning has been hidden from us by the conditioning of society. Social constructs dictate from an early and impressionable age which clothes, occupations, and personal pastimes are good, and which ones are bad. They dictate our meanings associated with race, with gender, with age, with mental illness, and with so many other aspects of our lives. By the time we've become adults, we've hardly created a fraction of the meanings that we so adamantly adhere to. This conditioning happens on every level, from the macro to the micro. Various decisions are made by the government entities of the world, while other choices are made by our friends, our families, our communities, our religion, and our social status. Much like the villagers in the story, the way in which we interpret reality has already been decided for us. We become like a flock of birds running around and chirping, "Oh, that's too bad, and isn't it wonderful?" to just about everything that happens, whether we are aware of it or not. It almost seems impossible not to automatically assign these meanings to our lives. But here's the kicker. Once we become aware of the source of so many of our heavily ingrained beliefs about reality, and recognize that they are not necessarily our own personal choices, then and only then can we begin to let go of those that no longer benefit us. We can begin to regain our autonomy, our personal agency, to decide how we would like to relate to the world and everything we experience. No longer being at the whim of how we have been conditioned to interpret reality. We are free to be like the farmer, neutral and unattached, and open to true contentment.